Hi everyone, Mike again with MEG Motors. Today we're going to be looking at this Poulan 2150 chainsaw. 2150 is a 2.1 cubic inch, which is 34 cc's, and it's a 16-inch chainsaw. We don't know a lot about it. I got this in a bundle deal with a couple other pieces off the Facebook Marketplace, and so we got to figure out what's going on with it. The big thing that we see right off the bat is that the pull rope has been pulled completely out of the saw. Not sure why that is. I don't know if the spring is broken in here or why this pulled out, but the rope actually looks fairly new. It looks to be in really good shape. So somebody may have tried to replace it and not knotted it correctly, and so it came unknotted and pulled out. That's what I'm hoping happened. I'm hoping the spring's not broke inside, but it may be. So we're gonna have to pull this apart, pull this cover off, and see what's going on with the starter, and then we can start looking at seeing if it runs, and if not, what we have to do to make it run. It's also really dirty, and so I'm going to spend a few minutes cleaning it up first, and then I'll reset the camera and we'll come back and we'll take a look at it and see what we have to do to make this one run. So stand by. Alright, so let's get started on figuring out what happened to the starter on this one. I'm going to have to take the top cover off first, and then this side cover. All right, so here's our starter. And so the question is the spring still good? Yeah, it feels okay so far. If it was broken, which is the other potential problem, I would expect it to have slipped by now. All right, so I don't think there's any chance that I would be able to get that pull rope in where it needs to be with it all together. But you know, I'm gonna try before I take it apart. And so the way it's supposed to work is that the pull rope has to come out of this hole, and it follows this groove right here and goes back under here, and then this screw gets tightened down to hold the cord in place. So I'm gonna try this quickly. Yeah, there is no chance that's going to happen. All right, I'm going to have to step away and get the right Allen wrench to take this off. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm going to take this Allen screw out right here in the middle. And I'm going to attempt to lift this off. Very good. Yeah, our spring looks okay. So there's the end that holds it in place in the housing, and then here's the end that attaches to the spool that has the rope on it, and they both look to be okay. So yeah, I think this just came untied basically. And so I'm going to run the rope down through here. Then we're going to run it up into that hole right there. I'm going to take this screw loose. And so, yeah, so the way this works is this wraps around No, I think it's supposed to go right there. And be held in place by this screw. We're going to put that all back together and see how that feels. All right, so I've got that all put back together. There's part of me, of course, that's wondering if that's enough. But it looks like that's the way it's designed to work. And so I'm inclined to say, yeah, that's enough. The cord feels like it's in there pretty strong. So I think we're going to try putting it just like that, and we're going to wind the cord up. We're going to set the spool back in place. So we're looking for this opening right here to go over the end of the spring that's supposed to catch that. Just like that. And so yeah, that's wound up. And then in a case like this where it's not quite tight enough, you can just take the cord and spin it around a couple times. Like that. And there we go. All right, put our bolt back in the middle. Interesting. I hope you can see this on the camera, but there's a molding right here that says 990 millimeter rope length. So it tells you how long the rope is supposed to be. I've never seen that before. That's kind of cool. All right, so I'm going to clean this cover up a little bit, and then we're going to put it back on, and we'll see if we can run a start-on spray test on this chainsaw and see if we need to do more work. I'm pretty sure we're going to have to, but let me clean that up first, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so I put the starter back on, and we're going to try a start-on spray test. So we know we need ignition, we need spark at the right time, and we need compression, and we need fuel to make this thing run. So we're going to run a start-on spray test. I'm going to open the carburetor, shoot a little carburetor cleaner in there, and then we're going to pull it through a few times to see if it'll start. It obviously won't start, but it'll try to start. If it does, we know that our ignition system's good and our compression's good, and we can start looking at the fuel system to see if we need to do some more work there. So I'm going to open the throttle, and I'm going to spray some carb cleaner in here. I'm going to lock the throttle open. The switch is on, so here we go. Let's see what happens. All right, good. So yeah, so we got a little start out of it, which is good. So that means that our ignition system is working, it's sparking at the right time, and we have enough compression for this engine to run. So we're going to need to take a look at the fuel system. I noticed the primer is loose in the housing here, although it does seem to be working. So we're going to do an evaluation of the fuel system. I'm sure we're going to pull the carburetor off of this one and go through it just to be sure, and see if we have any other work that needs to be done. And then once we get it running, we'll check the oiling system for the chain and make sure that that's working. And if it is, then we'll be done with this one. So I'm going to reset the camera and we'll start looking at the fuel system. So I wanted to do a quick update on this repair video. Shortly after we got the chainsaw back together, I attempted a start and the pull rope pulled out of the starter again, much like it was when we first got this one. And so I did some research and I found that I didn't have the pull rope attached properly inside the starter. And so this is the way that it's supposed to be attached. So the rope comes in, wraps around the pulley, and comes up out of the recoil starter here, wraps completely around the center hub, goes back under the pull start rope where it came out of the pulley, and then goes under the screw to be attached and retained by the screw. And so I've done it this way, and it seems to be working much better. The rope is at least staying in place now. So I just wanted to update that video because the way that I showed it in the original repair was not the correct way to install the rope. So here we go. Let's go back now and see if we can get this thing to start. All right, so we're going to get started taking this one apart. We need to get down to the primer bulb. This one's loose in there. I'm going to replace it, and we're going to get the carburetor off of it. I'm going to start taking these two nuts off here. Our air filter should come off. This little rubber piece comes off. So just looking at it, I was hoping to see or expecting to see maybe some broken fuel lines or something. Oh, there is something here. Oh yeah, there we go. This fuel line is disconnected. Let's see what happens if we connect that one. Yeah. So it was actually pumping some fuel, but the primer bulb just split. So again, there's a chance we might have been able to get this one to run, but it's just not worth it. And now I got... All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pull the carburetor off of this all the way, and we are gonna go through the carburetor, put some new fuel lines on it, put a new primer bulb on it, and just fix it up the way that it should be. So here's our carburetor. This one is a Walbro. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna reset the camera a little bit, and we're gonna go through the carburetor, and then we'll come back in a little bit and put some fuel lines on this. All right, so let's get started here. This is a standard diaphragm style carburetor. It has two main parts. There's a fuel pump on one side. This side here is a fuel pump, and this side is a metering chamber. And so the fuel pump pumps fuel out of the tank, and the metering chamber controls the flow of fuel into the engine. And so we're gonna take the fuel pump side apart first. All right, everything looks really good in there. So this is the fuel pump diaphragm, and so what we want to look for there is this diaphragm right here. This diaphragm is pulsed back and forth by the engine, by pulses from the crankcase in the engine. And then these two little valves right here, these two little flaps, are one-way valves that will alternately seal. They'll seal and allow fuel to flow through these various passages. And so using the pulsing diaphragm right here, fuel will flow from this pipe. It'll come up through here, through this one-way valve, which will open and allow the fuel to come up, come down through here into this chamber, come out here, and then down into this chamber, which is connected here to this screen. And this screen is a filter. There's a passage that goes all the way through the carburetor, and the other side of this screen is the needle in the metering chamber that controls how much fuel is stored in the metering chamber. And so all of that looks good. If obviously if this diaphragm were ripped or torn or had a hole in it, that wouldn't work. And if either one of these flaps are missing or damaged, it won't pump fuel. But those all look good. So yeah, so we're going to take the metering chamber side apart. This is where we see most of the trouble. So this diaphragm right here, this is a very important part of this carburetor. This diaphragm is what controls the flow of fuel into the metering chamber. It works in conjunction with this lever, and that lever works in conjunction with this needle. So as fuel is drawn, this is normally full of fuel, and as the engine draws fuel out of this chamber, it pulls the diaphragm down until that button on this diaphragm hits this lever, which unseats the needle and allows more fuel to flow into this chamber. And as the chamber fills and the diaphragm raises, the lever will raise and the needle will seat to stop fuel from coming in. So if that diaphragm goes bad, obviously that won't work, and the engine will either flood or starve for fuel. But it looks really good. And like I said, once I connected that fuel line back on the carburetor, it actually started pumping fuel. So there's a good chance that this might have run as it is. I don't see anything wrong in this carburetor. I don't see any of the standard problems that we see, which is this diaphragm becoming hard. This one actually feels really good. So yeah, so we're gonna work on putting a new primer bulb and some new fuel lines on the saw, and then we'll see if it'll run. So let me reset and I'll be right back. All right, so I've taken the side cover back off of this again so we can start working on fuel lines and the primer bulb, and I figured out why the primer was loose in the chainsaw. This is the primer that they had in there, which is a regular primer, but this one snaps into place, and this one is supposed to have this primer that has two screws that hold it in place. And so somebody somewhere along the line replaced the primer and they put the wrong one in. So that's why this one was loose in the saw. So we'll put the right one back in when we go back together with it. And so we're gonna put some new fuel lines on this one. We got two lines that we have to put on. A large one and a small one. And so for the large one, we're going to use this tool. And so this tool has a pull ring on one end and a hook on the other. And we can feed that in through the hole where the fuel line goes and take it back out the gas cap opening. And then we'll cut a taper on our fuel line like this. And we'll take a pick like this and we're going to poke a hole in it. And then we're going to feed that onto our tool. Sometimes this can be the hardest part. Oh, that went on pretty easy that time. All right, and then we're going to put a little lube on the line, and we're going to try to pull it back up through the hole in the saw. There we go. That one came out pretty easy. And this line is the return line, so it only needs to be in the tank a little ways, and so we're going to pull most of this line out. Going to watch it inside the tank until there's just a little bit left inside. All right, so that's good. So this line will go over to our primer bulb when we get the primer bulb on, but I'm going to save cutting that to length for later. And then we need another piece of line. This small line is what will be used to go to the fuel pickup inside the tank. So this is the weighted fuel pickup that slides around inside the tank, and this is the fuel line that will connect that to the carburetor. And so we have a problem with this line size because the tool is too big to go in that hole, so we can't use this tool. And so when I run into that problem, I use a homemade tool. This is just made out of a piece of safety wire, but it's basically the same thing. So we can feed that tool down through this little hole and pull it out. And then same thing, we'll cut a taper on the end of our line. We'll poke a hole in it. Then we'll feed it onto this piece of wire. And we're going to lube it up a little bit. And we're going to pull that back out. All right. And then we'll need to put our weighted pickup on the end of the line. And we'll drop that in the tank, and then we'll pull this line out until we have just enough line in there for that pickup to reach all sides, all ends of the tank. That looks pretty good. All right, and so then our primer, will go in right over here. And this line, so on the primer we have two lines. We have a short line and a long line. And the short line is the line that pulls fuel in, and the long line pushes fuel out. And so this return line goes on the long fitting. So we're going to cut that line to length. We're going to put that on the long fitting. And then the short fitting will go to the carburetor. All right, so we can slide, see if we can get our carburetor back on. Throttle linkage has gotten out of control. All right. There we go. Oh. Our throttle linkage came out of the throttle trigger. Let's try that again. All right. So this little line should go to the fuel pump side because the line coming out of the tank goes to the fuel pump. So we're going to cut this line off. We're going to slide it right on here. And then this line from the primer should go to the other fitting to draw fuel through the carburetor. We need to cut that one off just a little bit more. All right. Let's see. So then we should be able to put this piece back on and this piece back on. Put our two nuts on. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to put the choke back on. There we go. All right, put a couple screws in the primer. And put our starter back on. All right, I had dumped the fuel out of this, so I'm going to pour the fuel back in. There's actually not very much there. And this one, it says on the cap, it takes 40 to 1. I'm going to put a little more fuel in this, and we're going to reset the camera, and we're going to be ready to try to start this one. So give me just a minute, and we'll be right back. So before we try to start it, we're going to do a primer test. So I'm going to squeeze the primer bulb, and we should see fuel coming up through the small line and going back out through the big line. So let's see if we can pump some fuel. There it goes. I just saw it come up the little line, and there it is going down the big line. All right, so our lines are hooked up right, our carburetor's primed. Let's see if we can get it to start. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can get this one to start now. We got new fuel lines, new primer bulb, carb overhaul, and the recoil starter repaired. I've got a Phillips screwdriver to adjust the idle speed and a flat tip screwdriver to adjust the mixture. So luckily this carburetor just has regular flat screws on it. And so we're gonna see if we can get this one to start and then do any carburetor adjustments that we may need to do. So switch is on, choke is out, prime the bulb, and here we go. I'm going to lock the throttle open and see how that does. Wow, so that sounds really good, kind of right out of the box. Yeah, doesn't sound like it needs any adjustment at all. Seems to be running good, and I can see that the chain is oiling. There's fresh oil all over the chain. So that's all good. Yeah, I think we can call this one fixed. Like I said, carb overhaul, new fuel lines, new primer bulb, repair the starter. And yeah, I think it's ready to go cut some wood. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Check my playlist. There's other videos out there about other small engine repair. And yeah, I hope this encourages you to get out and maybe try some repairs on your own. This one wasn't terribly difficult, other than the fact that I didn't get the rope put on the starter correctly the first time and had to do that twice. But it seems to be working good now, so I think we got it right this time. So yeah, get out there, try to fix your own. They save you the expense of having to buy a new one. And yeah, stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next video.